No, I'll go for it. Quiet Place Day One, the third installment in the Quiet Place trilogy. This one has a different director, though. It's not Jim from The Office. It is Michael Sarnoski, who the last time we saw directed Pig, which you guys loved. In fact, wasn't it on your top 10 list, Todd, or it was on someone's top 10
Yeah,
list?
it was in my
I
top
was
5 Gagers.
Nice. I was not overly impressed by Pig, but I will say it wasn't because of the direction. The guy has a really good visual sense. Going into this movie, I gotta say I was a little reluctant. I was a little let down by Quiet Place Part 2. I think I was more on the negative side on that one. And also, I don't really remember a whole lot about the Quiet Place Part 2. What I was intrigued by, though, in this movie, and what I ultimately did end up liking a lot, is that this movie kind of abandons the John Krasinski, Emily Blunt family. They are nowhere to be found in this movie. This is basically a standalone movie that takes place at the beginning of, I guess we call it the invasion by the creatures that apparently have very bad eyesight, but they have great hearing ability. In case you literally live under a rock and haven't heard of the Quiet Place franchise. The main character, our hero in this movie, is Lupita Nyong'o, Academy Award winner. She plays Samira, who at the beginning of the movie we see in hospice care. And when the invasion happens, she is visiting central Manhattan at a marionette show. Very good marionette show. Charlie Kaufman would have been proud of that shit. And the attack happens, and unlike the majority of people who flee and make loud noises and get eaten up right away, she actually kind of heads into the danger zone. One of the things I liked a lot about this movie is that we don't always know what Lupita Nyong'o is up to in this movie. We do know that she's dying. We do know that she has a cat. Great cat movie. Best cat New York City movie, I think, since Inside Llewyn Davis. Great cat performance. And we don't always know her backstory, in part because when you get 20 minutes in this movie, no one can speak. She's met along the way by a couple people, but the main person she meets is Eric, played by Joseph Quinn. And I think he's studying to be a lawyer. He's from England, and he is afraid that he is going to be abandoned all by himself without family or friends. And together they form a sort of kinship and try to survive the occasional attack when things like, glass hitting the ground happen. I really enjoyed this movie. I was kind of surprised by how much I enjoyed this movie. One of the things I really liked about it was like I said earlier, you didn't always know what Lupita Nyong'o was thinking or doing. I got to say I was surprised by how intelligent the relationship was between these two main characters, both of whom have sort of desperate circumstances, and we don't know a whole lot about their backstories, but we know enough. And it's really great acting in their faces to kind of show the compassion and kinship that they have for one another. This movie works not just as an action set piece, but also as a silent film. I actually think you could take their relationship, Lupita Nyong'o and Joseph Quinn's relationship in this movie, and take out the creatures and make a really interesting silent movie. There are scenes in this movie that are really well done. There's a scene when he tries to go find her medicine. There's a scene where they're in a pizza parlor that I thought was beautifully done. It kind of reminded me of the great 1989 movie Sidewalk Stories. And the resolution of this movie is exciting, and it leaves you on the edge of your seat. And the last image of the movie is really done. I was very impressed by pretty much everything in this movie. I think I love that this movie took it a different direction. As much as I miss the deaf daughter from the family in the first two Quiet Place movies, I think this movie needed a little bit of a refresh. The problem I think I had with the first two movies is that it got a little predictable. Every time literally something drops on the floor, then a creature pops up out of nowhere. And I think Sarnoski wisely realizes that there's a sort of ceiling to that. And the drama in this movie is not just about what noises will spur the creatures to come and attack, but what these characters will do next and if they will attain the goals that they have set out for themselves. This movie really kind of rocks. I give it 3.5 stars. Great seeing Lupita Nyong'o back in a prominent role. And I gotta say, I was really kind of surprised by how much I dug this movie. So great job, Michael Sarnoski. Really, really fun movie.
All right. Todd, where are you at?
Okay. The idea for this movie, I think, is really typical. It's like horror sci-fi origin story. It's like The Purge, Alien, any zombie movie, and this does nothing to really make it different. And A Quiet Place without silence kind of betrays the whole idea of the saga, and that's what we get for like the first part of it. I think the opening of part 2 is actually a more effective way to do it. But with Pig, Sarnoski had a lot of setup and of like stakes and ideas, and it worked because the tone never really changed. But here, like the setup is the least interesting part. I would have just like jumped right into it or something, because it's an unknowable monster would have been interesting. But the opening act is like really lazy and familiar and really kind of convenient. I think Nyong'o is really good. She's expressive with her eyes, and that's perfect for a kind of movie like this. Joseph Quinn is like a dead ringer for Colin Firth, but apparently that guy's only 30 years old. I would have sworn he was at least 55. What happened to Jaimin Hanso's career? Like, I mean, he's got what, like 2 lines in this? The family dynamics is what made the first 2 interesting, and here it's just random people who don't really know each other or don't really like each other, and it all is like a bunch of these like little scenes that are trying to like recreate the stakes of the bus scene in the finale of MASH. It's like, I mean, it's like, do I kill this person? Do I not? Do I kill this pet? Do I not? Because they're making noise, whatever. There's an inconsistent use of the rules. Like, I don't know why the aliens don't like drive themselves crazy. Like, they crash through shit all the time. Like, how does that not alert the other aliens? And how do they not like just drive themselves up a wall because they're constantly making noise, but they're like super like focused on like some small noise like in the distance? It makes no sense. And then this movie really amplifies that. Sarnoski can craft a scene, but this is not the way his skills should be used. A little cage never hurt anyone either. I'm giving it 1.5 stars. This movie really sucks, and I really like the first 2.
Wow. Okay, so we've got 1.5 from Todd. We got 3.5 from Zach.
Split the atom, Terry.
I am almost entirely on board with Zach.
Yeah, shock. You're not giving it 1.5 stars, obviously.
There we go, Terry.
You're the one that gave 4 stars to the first one.
You go, man.
No, the first 2 I gave 3.5. And this I'm giving a high 3, almost to 3.5. What I love about this movie and what I love about this whole franchise now is this setup. I feel like this premise of these creatures and the quiet place and all of this. I feel like it's such a rich setup. I mean, kind of going back to what we were talking about with the last movie and how the setup was lacking and we were having trouble getting into wondering what's going to happen next. The setup and atmosphere and universe of The Quiet Place is so rich that I feel like they could make these movies for the next 100 years and still find interesting stuff to tell. Because you can just say, well, what happens if we drop a movie where this is our setting and these creatures are around? And because the silence adds so much suspense and so much stuff to it, I think it's hard to go wrong when making one of these movies. And you add in someone with the patience of Sarnoski, and it really works well. Like you guys said, Lupita Nyong'o is great. I think the cat is a early front runner for favorite minor character of the year at the Pinos.
How's it minor?
I don't know. Because it
doesn't have any lines.
Yeah, it doesn't have any lines. You mentioned Jaimin Hanso, so the one thing I will say is that is the one callback to other movies. Is he in part 2? He's the one that runs the society on the island, yeah. And so that's the one callback to the previous movies. Is Jaimin Hanso? You see where he started,
and the boats, how the aliens get to the island, and yeah, like I mean, yeah. I mean, I got it. I mean, it is written by Krasinski, so.
Well, the story, I think he gets a story credit. I don't know. I was intrigued. I was taken in. I was right there with everyone. And yeah, high 3 stars. Probably should be a 3.5, but I'm going high 3 stars right now. I can't believe you're giving it 1.5. I thought I don't see how you could not like it that much.
I mean, like I said, it takes the ideas of the first one and it just makes like a lame prequel version of it with less interesting characters. The family is what made the first 2 interesting, and it has none of that. And it's just these random people. It's like, yeah, you could drop and tell the same story in another city and drop and telling the same story in another country, but it's not going to be as interesting and intimate as it is with the original family. It's just another lame sci-fi horror movie that out there, and I was disappointed that Sarnoski is like decided that this was what he wanted to do after making such a brilliant movie like Pig that's so grounded in reality.
I can't think of another.
Go ahead.
I was just saying, I can't think of another action movie that's quite like this movie. I can't think of a movie where there is a threat to civilization and you have a protagonist who, in this case, is in hospice care, and so she's close to death, but she doesn't seem, you don't know if she's fazed by the events surrounding her or not. You don't know what she's thinking. She walks into the danger while everyone is walking away. Now, I understand what Todd is saying.
Something? Is this kind of the same thing?
How is it the same thing? I mean, this is a woman who we don't know.
Because you don't know anything about the character, and he's just doing things that you don't really understand until you do.
Do we ever even fully understand what's going on in her mind? I mean, I think that was fascinating. I agree that you can nitpick the logic of if the creatures are going to come and find, if the sounds of people walking in order. I get that. At some point, I kind of suspended my disbelief in this movie because I was so wrapped up in the characters. I kind of lost interest in the whole creature aspect of the movie and became much more concerned and interested in the dynamics of the two characters. And I think the movie does sort of say at the end, it's about human compassion that will lead to the survival of the species, which is I think an interesting point that I don't know if it was totally in the first two movies, which again I kind of thought just got predictable, one kind of action set piece after another. This movie does have, I think, some tremendous action set pieces, but I think its most effective moments are the scenes when the creatures aren't even remotely involved. And there was never a moment when I thought, okay, Sarnoski's going to have the creatures break into this scene and just mess everything up, because he's someone who I think is more interested in characters than the action in the movie. So I don't know. I think 1.5 is disingenuous. You're free to give it whatever, but I think this is a really stellar and unique interpretation of a saga that I think got a little bit predictable in its second iteration.
I find it fascinating, this conversation that we're having, because Todd is saying that this movie is lame, predictable, poor setup, focusing on the wrong characters, the world building is all off. This is the exact same thing Zach just said about Horizon, and it's just a
this movie had laser focus though.
I think it's just preference though. I mean, I think it's Todd looked at Horizon and saw something that he wanted, that he loved, and Zach saw this and saw something he loved, while the other one hated the other way around.
This is the thing. Like, comedies and horror movies are terrible when they're not great. They're not good at all. Like, they have no redeeming qualities. This is a couple, but that's about it.
You didn't think that pizza parlor scene was good, Todd? You're telling me you watched that scene? Yeah, I get it. I get that you can pick nits about whether the creatures invade or not, but like, you didn't think that was a good scene? I thought that was a beautifully scene, like the scene between the two characters. It's beautifully done.
Has anyone ever said pick nits?
Yeah, that's a real thing, isn't it? Pick nits.
I don't know.
Nitpicking
is. But
yeah, right. Picking nits. Yeah,
I think Bill Simmons says that. But yeah, I mean, you could look at this movie as like, my banner says, Sam and Cat go to get a Patsy's Pizza. Like, I mean, it's Harold and Kumar. They just want to go get a slice. And yeah, but I mean, that's only interesting until they get there, and then after that, it's just like, okay.
All right. Well, Judge Mathis has
Killian Murphy was great in the second one.
His verdict, which is Team Zach in the wild, #. Thank you, Terry. Todd didn't like this movie, but I think most of America agrees this has a substantially higher Rotten Tomatoes score than Horizon. But I do agree
it's got a lower IMDb score if you check that. But that's where the people actually think, not critics.
I do wonder. I hope in Quiet Place Part 4 that we get a little bit better definition of what the creatures can hear or what they choose to selectively ignore. It does seem a little odd that they would just selectively ignore some noises rather than others. But I was with it.
If you didn't like the first two, then why did you go see this one? If you're saying that you're not interested in the third Horizon or the second Horizon because you like the first one, then what keeps you going to watch these?
I wouldn't have seen this if we hadn't decided to see it. I wasn't interested. I'm glad I saw it. It's a testament to the fact that sometimes you got to go to movies that you're not. I don't go to third parts of movies. Are you kidding? But I did, and I found myself enjoying it more than I ever thought possible. Mostly due to Lupita Nyong'o. I think she's terrific in this movie. She deserves an Oscar nomination.
I loved the first two, and Todd, you're right. What made the first two so fascinating was the family, and the family is awesome. The second one is a lot of retread of the first one, but it does it in a different way, and it's great.
Wasn't that the one with the really bad baseball scene at the beginning?
Yeah.
You just said that the intro to that movie was better than
the actual landing of the aliens is interesting, but I remember the baseball was bad.
Of course it's bad. What I'll say is I think for me what this third one establishes is part of what makes the first two so good isn't just the family dynamic, but it is the world building that has been done, and these fascinating creatures that force you to bring about this this intense setting of not being able to make a noise. I think that's one of the things that this whole thing has going for it, and that's one of the things I took away from the third one. By the way, also Zach, no one says Central Manhattan; it's Midtown, and and I watched a double feature last night where both movies were in Midtown Manhattan. So because I watched Daddy-O and Quiet Place Day One, I found that kind of funny that both of them were there. Daddy-O, by the way, higher IMDb score than both Quiet Place and Horizon.
So. But Horizon is higher than A Quiet Place Part 3.
Yes, Horizon has 5,000 votes. Quiet Place Day One has 13,000, and Daddy-O has 900. So
money talks and bullshit walks, according to Bobby Flexman from our next movie. So just remember, kid.
Daddy-O is the best movie.
People actually saw Quiet Place Part 3.